really enjoy the FXR for the opportunity to try to give back a little bit and help other people. We can learn from each other, but trying to really challenge myself to be a better technician and understand some of this stuff where the puzzle is become very familiar. You know, you take apart a bunch of these things and start to rewire them and clean these things up. And I kind of called it like motorcycle rehab. We're like, get it in, like, all right, you know, you've had a rough go at things, and then clean it up and then send it back out. You know, we're all kind of in it. I need to make money, everybody does, but it's also just really fun to express yourself through the motorcycle. I'm Jesse Kaler. I've been working on motorcycles for nearly 10 years, and it's been quite an adventure. The FXR kind of got a hold of me a little ways in and hasn't let go. My dad was always kind of a mechanicking, you know, like he worked on cars, he did some stuff, he was a truck driver, and he had a couple classic cars, and he had a 74 Toyota Land Cruiser with like a 350 in it, and we'd take us out romping around in that thing, my brother and I, and so some of that nature kind of comes from him. I spent a lot of time in the garage watching him. With the cars, it was kind of like a big thing where it's almost like a one-man job. He's in there under the hood. You know, I did the prank of beeping the horn once and found out that was a mistake. But I did spend a lot of time with my dad in the garage and just kind of watched how he was working and looking at tools and putting them away and using them and losing them in the yard type of stuff. Same thing my kids are doing to me now. I'd like to involve my kids with most of the things that I do, just to even spend a little time with them. And Theo and Nigel each have grown up in the garage. You know, I have pictures of them sleeping next to the lift or next to the toolbox. So they've picked up wrenches, and I've got pictures of them trying to fit Allen wrenches into axles and all kinds of stuff. You know, it's not always the right tool, but they see me do it, so they kind of follow suit. It's pretty neat, like with taking Theo to the swap meet and seeing him engage and picking up parts and trying to explain what they are and what they do. And some of these old timers see that and they're like, you know, they're like, good, passing on the torch and kind of keeping that alive is important. Yeah, throughout high school and things, I didn't really have that mechanical nature in me just yet. And after high school, you know, joining the Marine Corps, I was active duty for 8 years. Did, you know, some deployments with that, and you're growing up and maturing a little bit, and just getting used to, you know, kind of being more of a man where you're doing some of this stuff and learning from other people, where setting up the radios and having to like actually do some hard work gets you more familiar with this type of stuff. One of my motivations for joining the Marine Corps was just to get out and get away and just kind of step outside my comfort zone with that. There was a lot of brotherhood there. It was pretty neat. There was, you know, you meet a lot of interesting people. And for a while there, I was trying to relive some of that time with my dad. And I had a few different classic cars. I still owned a 71 Cutlass. That was my older brother's car before he passed away. I held it on to that car like 20 years, and it was really neat. But like I said, I really wasn't into mechanicking or anything just yet. So paying other people to work on that car got really expensive. And right before I got out of the Marine Corps, it was 2012, came back from Afghanistan, a group of friends, they all had Harleys and stuff and riding around Hawaii. They were like, dude, you got to kind of ditch the car thing and try these out. And I had a couple different convertible cars throughout my life and a lot of fun, driving around the beach with, some wind in your face. But then they were like, you got to try a bike, and just kind of forced myself. I bought a 1998 Dyna. It was a Super Glide, and I didn't even know how to ride it. I bought it, and my buddy rode it back to the house for me. And with like the first ride, I was just hooked. I was like, yeah, these are great, but you got to get better at it. I ended up leaving the island, going back to Oregon, and shipping the Dyna back, and kind of went from there. One thing that really motivates me is there's a few other guys that are even active duty. Like now that I've been working in this for like nearly 10 years and have made it a focus, and there's more of a presence on social media where there's years and years of kind of credibility, so to speak, where people are seeing that. And I get messages every now and then from guys looking for advice or just talking in some of the Vets Helping Vets mentorship groups. There's guys like, hey, I'm thinking about going to MMI. I'm like, well, I didn't really go to traditional MMI. The Harley dealer like sponsored me, and I went down to those classes to get the certification. So I'm like, you don't have to spend your GI Bill necessarily to start this path. So it's kind of cool to mentor, coach, and try to motivate people to see, what they can do with this type of industry. In the early days, like even still, well, early days for me is 2012, so it's not that long ago. In Hawaii, there was a couple guys that were like, yeah, you guys need to get on the FXR page and the Dyna pages for Facebook when those were still really helpful and popular. And, owning it, or first bike being a Dyna, I, didn't know really what the FXR was. So I saw a lot of hype about it, and then you see like the unknown guys like wheeling and things, and you're like, these look pretty fun. And I ended up crashing that Dyna a few years after owning it. And with that like insurance money and stuff, I was like, I'm gonna jump on the bandwagon and see what's up with these FXRs. And I got a 91 FXRs out of Colorado. And it was just a super clean bike. And like the first ride on that, I was like, well, the brakes kind of suck, but this is a really fun bike. With riding the first FXR, it was just a very enjoyable ride. And then what's kind of kept me in this realm is the community is really strong behind it. There's a lot of people that are sharing information and have a little more like mutual respect, I feel. And the community is a big part of what the backing is, what keeps me with them.
Hey guys, want to take a quick break from the interview to talk about one of our sponsors, ThunderMax. Not only do these guys provide a lot of performance parts options for us, they do a ton to support the scene, from sponsoring my interview series to their annual event, the Performance Throwdown. Everything is manufactured right here in Middle Tennessee, from their I-Ride suspension, oil cooler fan, performance tuners, and more. Specifically today, I want to talk about their tuners. Their performance ECMs use a highly advanced standalone tuning system that utilizes proprietary auto-tune technology with wideband O2 sensors. Super easy to install, just replace the factory ECM and O2 sensors, upload a base map, and go for a ride. The ThunderMax ECM is fully adjustable using their tuning software, or you can just upload one of their provided base maps. Say you want to upgrade your motor later with a new cam setup. All you do is upload a new base map and go riding. I've been running one of their tuners on my Road Glide, along with their oil cooler fan, as do many of the bikes I cover on my channel. I have nothing but good things to say about them. Make sure to go check these guys out. I'll put their website below, as well as their YouTube that has a lot of great install videos, as well as information on base map selection. Go check them out. Let's get back to the video.
One of the early motivations for me was like seeing people saying like built, not bought. And I'm like, okay, well, I could own a Harley, and just like cars, having someone else work on it and fix it for you gets really expensive. Even immediately after the Marine Corps, I was climbing cell towers and making pretty good money there, working for like General Dynamics. So, but I took my Dyna to this Harley dealer and had like the wheels powder coated and swapped and all this stuff, and ended up with like a $5,000 bill. And I was like, whoa, I need to figure this out and start to wrench on these myself. And that's kind of where some of the progression started. We were at my buddy Mike's birthday party, and had a few drinks, and there were like a couple guys are, talking about whose bike's the fastest and, all this stuff. They're going to go out to the street and drag race. And I'm like, okay, well, I want in on that. So I took my FXR out there and did like one launch, and like the hard Dunlop just slid everywhere. And I really didn't know what I was doing. But second time around, hammered it again, snapped the drive belt somewhere through there, and grenaded the transmission. So we just rolled it back into Mikey's garage and put it up on a milk crate and started taking it apart. I'm like, well, I'm going to powder coat the bars now, all this stuff. So pulled it apart, and that's really where like my technician career was kind of like initiated from. After that bike got pulled apart in Mike's garage, we were looking at trying to finish it, and then kind of got it. I was in over my head and called a bike shop, and they came with a trailer and we loaded it up on there, took it there, and I ended up paying them a bunch of money again to finish it, and rode it to Canada and back. And once I got back from Canada, the cell tower gig was getting real burned out, and ended up talking to the guy who fixed that FXR for me, put it back together. But I went into that bike shop and I was like, I'm on unemployment. You don't even have to pay me. I'm just here to learn. And I started sweeping floors and cleaning up. And they had a bike that they were sponsoring for the Woodburn drag strip. And they were talking about making some fender struts and doing this with the fender and extending the swing arm. And I was like, I have some ideas. And I just started making cardboard templates and showed him. And he was like, grab some metal. And we started grinding metal and ended up welding them onto the bike. And he was like, you look like you work here. I was like, yeah, I think I do. And I stayed there. It was outside of Portland, Oregon, Jasper and Company. Little over a year and a half. Finally bailed on that. I was like, I need to get the hell out of Portland anyway. Ended up down in Eugene, Oregon, where my family's from. Started going to community college and everything, and met my wife. And her family friend, Rod, did own, he's retired now, what was a Triumph shop, and he was a Triumph dealer. He was kind enough to give me a chance to work for him. So I wrenched on a few metric bikes, and I was kind of like his Harley guy. When I got out of classes, I'd run over there, and he'd have like some tire jobs and stuff waiting for me. So I'd wrench there, and all the while I was building, kind of messing with my FXR at home, and then another FXR led into another one and more projects. So back at the garage at my family's property was just, doing my thing, working there, but I was buying parts from the Harley dealership and walking in there and like, hey, motorcycles, pretty well-spoken guy, and why don't you come over and try to do sales? I was like, whatever, any industry experience at this point is good. So went over to the Harley dealer and did the sales thing for a little bit. And then a lady got fired from the parts counter for stealing. So the parts manager knew that I was, familiar with these, the nomenclature, puzzle pieces, and the lingo, the verbiage. I jumped over to the parts counter for a little bit. And after a while, I was kind of getting burned out on that. I'm like, I really need to get back to like wrenching and progressing, because that's where my heart's at. So I transferred from, sales, parts, and then over to the service department and started training with them and got the VA involved. So with the community college, I was able to earn credits toward OJT. So I got a certificate, certified from the college to be a Harley technician. And then as well as the dealership was sending me to these courses, whether it's Phoenix, Orlando type of stuff, and ended up as a expert level tech through the dealership. right around that same time of the college experience, the Harley experience, and all of that, you know, with Christina, we started off the family pretty quickly. So now we have kids, or a kid, and then led into more. But all the while, like I said, the FXR pages and information that was shared through Facebook was pretty convenient. And I'd see other big names in the industry. I'm like, man, like I want a taste of that. You know, I could see what they're doing, and it was a lot more fun than the average, you know, kind of service work at the dealership. So having started off at an independent shop, I was looking forward to trying to get back to those roots. You know, all the while, like every now and then communicating with John. And then in 2019, there was the initial West Coast FXR jam. So rode my POS 85 FXR down there and snapped another belt. So leaving, you know, the whole jam was a super successful weekend. A lot of riding, some really cool roads, and meeting all these people I sold parts to and bought from, and names and faces are now like more familiar, which was really neat. It's a great experience and way to get the community together in like one spot. But upon leaving the hotel, drive belt snapped. I'm like, shit, I'm stranded. So once again, you know, jumped on like people through Instagram and stuff. This other guy came and helped me load my bike up, and grabbed a U-Haul, and John's like, bring it over to Stockton and we'll help you out. So he was still out riding like in Yosemite or something. So I got to his house, he wasn't even there. So I just kind of waited. He showed up and let me crash at the house. You know, fed me coffee and dogs in the morning, a pet. And then we went to the shop, and Taylor, one of his employees or former employees, super rad dude, had done a chain drive and had a spare belt. So put a new belt in the bike, and I finished the ride like the next morning, you know, all the way back up to Oregon. It was pretty rad. So I already knew he was a good guy. I thought he had a pretty good business plan and a solid team. So then when he made the decision to make his way out to Tennessee, I thought that was like really cool, a unique opportunity to get back out here and challenge myself. Because every time you're going from like one shop to another, there's certain things that you get comfortable with. You know, you're like, this is just how we do things. But then you get here and you're like working with someone new, and you're like, no, like this is easier. This is a better way. So working with new technicians and other cool guys was exactly what I needed. It was what I was looking for. So I've grown here in my abilities greatly just in the couple years of working for John. I really like the FXR tanks, you know, just the shape of that tank. It's a very, well, now, you know, it's a familiar look. And it's funny that, you know, from reading, you know, I wasn't around for all this personal history of it, but when they came out that they weren't like widely popular. And now like looking at this, I'm like, that's a Harley. You know, the M8 Softails are growing on me a little bit too, but it's still, I'm like, I've got one now, and I hop between the two. I get on this, and I'm like, this, I'm just like locked in. I'm like, this is home. You know, so these bikes, they just have, to me, is just a really refined look to it. It's also just really fun to express yourself through the motorcycle, you know, like especially this R4, it's very identifiable as my bike. And that's one thing that's pretty neat is you can put your stamp on these things. They can be challenging. They'll fight you every step of the way. But if you're persistent, like you can get through working on these things. And that's where I started was, you know, you see some guy ask a question and everyone's like, oh, what a dumbass. And you're like, no, like I cut the wires of my taillight the first time I wanted to change it. I didn't know. And so here I am where it's like now it's not even really a daunting task to build my own wiring harness for these things. So you look at some of those concepts or pieces of a motorcycle construction that used to be a daunting task and were really challenging, and you break it down into smaller pieces and just make it a manageable process. And being able to mentally do that and even see the layers of it just by looking at the motorcycle has been really good for me. You know, military wise, you know, we all get stressed out. There's some tension there and ways that I don't know how to manage myself sometimes. And this is motorcycle therapy for me. With putting a lot of these bikes together, or just the few that I've done, some of the changes that I like doing are already present in the R4, which is really neat. You know, so you got a little bit, we've got some upgraded brakes. The fork lowers accept more options for calipers without having adapters. A speed sensor in the transmission. The last 2 bikes that I did had an aftermarket trans case or another like trap door, you know, for like a 6-speed, and put a speed sensor in there. So I'm not a huge fan of the Speedo drive cable off the front wheel. I think it's just kind of ugly. The gauges are really large. You know, seal bearing wheels, you know, the Timken wheels are great if you set them up correctly, and that's something that gets neglected. But the kind of set it and forget it of a seal bearing wheel is a little convenient. You know, you just got to stay on top of your maintenance there. But some of those just unique features of it, I know that the primary drive ratio, and then with the chain drive on here, this thing cruises down the freeway just phenomenally. It's super smooth. And I don't need a 6-speed in this bike. So most FXRs that we find out there may have some great parts on them, but they've been leaking, you know. But once you get it and you're like, you know, like a higher standard of it and wanting for it to be reliable and as reliable as it can be and safety, you know, you're going to start with the frame up basically. And I've done a few of those. It's a lot of work and it takes time, but it's an enjoyable task for the most part. And with this bike, the low miles on it, the updates, and kind of the reliability behind it, it's just a very enjoyable bike to, you know, I can get on it. I know that the carburetor's clean and things like that. It pretty much fires right up every time, and, you know, keep the battery charged and it'll just go. This bike was a little bit of the ugly duckling when I found it, and John helped me find it and swoop this thing up, which was a pretty rad opportunity. But with it being an excellent platform, we can always make it better. And out here in Tennessee, like, the roads are just super windy, curvy, a lot of fun. And having a little bit taller suspension is, you know, it's not necessary for these bikes, but I just like the look of it and how it feels. So made a few changes, and with these changes, I'd like to try to use things that are either common to this bike or from Harley-Davidson in some ways. The paint was really nice, or still is. So the yellow grows on me for sure, or most people, you know, so it's a bike that you can find in a lot. And with that, I just wanted to kind of keep it looking stock, but having these modifications to make it, you know, it's already pretty modern for the FXR, but just making it a more visual bike as well. So the wheels are from Harley, the headlight, things like that. So part of it for me too is what do I have on hand? You know, what can I use that's not going to cost a lot of money, because I can make up that type of difference with my labor. You know, so not everyone has that opportunity. The wheels had to go. You know, the R4 came with a solid disc, like rear wheel, solid hub, and the spoke front, and it was just really ugly to me. So I was trying to weigh my options in what I could do. And this is actually the first bike that I've had a really drastic difference in the wheels. You know, like 13 spoke mags, 9 spoke mags, powder coat them, and you're done. But I wanted to kind of elevate myself and challenge, and then also the look of the bike. So the paperclip wheels going with the 1918 combo was pretty neat. And then even when I got them, I was like, yeah, these are lightweight. They're going to look good. But it was, do we paint them a little bit, you know, throw in like a yellow stripe? And I was like, I got to go chrome. And the chrome was a gamble, and that was the expensive part in regard to these wheels. But it paid off. But with that, the front hub is wider than the 13 spokes to the 9 spokes. So I went to a mid-glide front end, which was also something I was almost concerned about. I'm like, is this going to look good? And it's just enough that it's well hidden into the bike, especially with the fairing, to kind of disguise it. Most people don't even comment on that. So that was a challenge in itself to, you know, find the right parts. I wanted to keep the fork legs because I'm like, why would I, you know, change the whole front end when this is already a sexy chrome, you know, setup? So I kept that going, you know, and that means keeping a 3/4 axle, but these are 25 mil wheels. And Brock's Performance, through another friend, turned me on to these, makes a bearing that is the same dimensions as a 25 mil, but the inner sleeve is fat. So it doesn't taper, but it draws it back down to a 3/4. So that way I could run, you know, a 3/4 axle, keep my fork legs. Seen guys do this on these, just use the sealed bearing 3/4 bearings, but they're a double row. So they got bearing material like sticking out of the wheel and stuff, you know. So if it works, it works. But you know, I couldn't quite do that to this bike. But that required measurements and, you know, getting with a few friends that are machinists to cut me some spacers and a crush tube for these wheels. So the transition did take a while. The fairing is a M8 Softail quarter fairing, and I cut those brackets multiple times as everything changed. Because first I tried it on the narrow glide front end, and then once more parts came in and this project progressed, the fairing took a few different stages. With the Speed Merchant triple trees, they come with a standoff for the headlight, and I was able to use some spacers and bolt up this M8 Lowrider S headlight without the bucket, which allowed me to draw the fairing. And the headlight is nearly touching the frame in the back, but it's got full clearance, nothing's rubbing. So it sucked it back in instead of being away from the bike, and gave it, you know, a really natural look to this. And I wanted to keep the big turn signals are probably ugly to a lot of people, but they keep this bike looking more factory. The idea of keeping it factory-esque and looking toward creating something that is how Harley should have done it is what was exciting for me. And a big shout out to Lefevre Cycles, who helped me out with the paint. And we worked together on the bag graphics that his wife actually painted. It's not a decal. So we were, you know, looking at different angles and things, and I didn't want to do the lids, but I knew that with like a CVO paint job, Harley's going to put something on the bag. Like fairing is fine, you know, it's a smaller piece, side covers there, but like a saddlebag is like, they can't leave it alone. So neither could I, you know, I put that on there and then threw the staple Lucky You in there that's been on a few of my bikes. The front fender is actually carbon fiber. Los Angeles Fairing Company made that for me, and they hooked it up. It was pretty cool. So the front decal, or not decal, but the front graphic on the fender is also like nearly a mirrored match to what is stock on here. But I wanted something that looked a little more aggressive than that stock fender. With these wheels, the spokes flare out pretty aggressively from the hub, and fitting brake calipers can be kind of tricky. So the Ness brake calipers had a little bit of a narrower profile, and they fit on there pretty well. So that way, you know, this, like I said, the whole spacing of this front end was a little bit of a challenge. So just getting everything aligned where it's not going to rub, and we keep chrome shiny. The stock R4 handlebars are similar to some of the Sportsters where they were like enclosed and it was a straight riser and you have the indicator panel on there. And I've fallen in love with a riser with some pullback. It just makes it really comfortable. It's an easy setup to do. And but when I did that, I lost those chrome covers. So I kind of like did some research, and buddy Evan had a Dyna, and I was looking at his handlebars, and they're semi-enclosed, but it's a pullback riser with the indicator panel. So I jumped on eBay and found this Dyna cover and had to like slightly massage the outer covers and put a little grommet between the clamp for the riser portion of it. And it gave me a nice smooth chrome cover to hide that little bit of electrical panel or the indicator panel, some of the wiring. 9.5-inch rise, pullback, and some Big Al's bars. I like their bars, they're pretty comfortable. The exhaust pipe I had kind of set up for another project, but it fit this bike really well. I like the space that it provides, but the RB brackets have standoffs off the trans case and then a flat bracket. And I was having some trouble with there. None of their fault, but I decided to go away with that and set this offset bracket to just get everything off the frame. It mimics the same frame tab that is on the early FXR frames with a rubber isolator in there. And I've been in love with this thing since then. So that was another little bit of a challenge, but it is pretty easy to get through. The seat is actually John Jessup's design with Saddlemen. So this one doesn't say Team Dream Rides on it because it's actually like an early prototype, which is kind of neat. So John had this on another bike at the shop, and I had like, when we first got it, it looked like a Heritage. It had this big round like Mustang seat. And I was like, I can't. They're like, come on, we're going riding. I'm like looking around the shop, like, where's the seat? Because I don't want to be seen outside with this thing. So I nabbed that, and it's really comfortable. It's got a little bit of a curve in the back, so it gives you some real estate. I'm not the tallest guy, but there's some leg room on these bikes with mids. And wanting the bike just a little bit taller, I did, I think it's track or die, the 2-over dampener rods and some Race Tech suspension in the front end. So that got the front end up. And I knew that these wheels were the 1918 combo, but I wanted the bike to still sit pretty level. And at first, when I put the front end on, it was like a chopper, type of thing. I was like, ooh, this is a little aggressive. And a friend hooked me up with the all-in shocks. And then I swapped the struts out for the RT style from like the FXRS and RT, like they have a few inch difference in where the shock bolt actually goes through the frame. So this gets the shock more vertical and then lifts the bike up. And then with that 18-inch wheel, it's like riding a dirt bike. I've been out here, like hit a pothole or like the edge of a road and you just bounce right over it and you're like, hey, we're good. With Lefevre doing the paint on here, I had seen these bags on a few FXRs, and the Sportster and FXR rear fender nearly identical. So I knew that they had a really neat flow to the bike, and adding some more yellow and brightness to this thing was something that I wanted to do to really catch the eye and have a sexy flow to it. And I didn't know how I was going to mount them, so that was a little bit of a challenge. And in just staying late at the shop and rethinking the issue, it's pretty simple. It's straightforward. Seth, he's down in Alabama. He has a set on his RD, and I was like talking with him about how he did it. And we ended up going a different route, but it's like the same concept, just executed a little different. So, but these bags going on there with the turn signals extended out gives it a really neat look and classic kind of nature to that. Adds to the body lines of the bike. So riding this bike, I was like, you know what, let's just see what happens. A lot of people were like, they see a 2000 and they're like, oh, that thing's been, you're going to have to change this gasket, all through. Well, I did the primary, when I did the chain drive, but it wasn't leaking then. But riding the Thunder Max and back, we were on the freeway, pushing 85, 90 for quite a ways. And I looked down and the rear rocker box gasket was just like spewing oil out. And I was like, oh, well, it was like the little Evo that could. We're like, come on, little buddy, like you're going to make it. And John's on his turbo bike, and he's cruising, and he had to fill up his gas before mine. He's using a lot of fuel in that thing. But it was just fun that we're like, these guys are on M8s and turbos and this and that. And like, here I'm on this Evo, just like, wow, let's go. So it's a lot of fun. It's a very comfortable bike. And like I said, on the freeway, it just flies. It's so much fun. I think it's pretty neat, working at Dream Rides. John has a lot of visibility, so he's got other guys, big other manufacturers, exhaust companies and parts guys and things coming in. And they're like, hey, are you going to hop on your bike? And John's like, that's not my bike. And I'm like, yes, like just to be kind of like have people appreciate it in that manner, that it has a classy look to it where most people appreciate it, but it's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, like people see it and sometimes they dismiss it as almost a stock bike, and you're like, well, a lot of it is, but it was also a lot of work to maintain that illusion with adding, these parts to it. With this, going to some of these other FXR events, like even John's FXR show, you're seeing like a lot of clean bikes that these guys have put so much work into, and you can respect that. So there's some people that see it and they don't realize, but they're fairly rare. There's 600 some, made, and there's definitely a bunch out there. I've seen a few, and even had the opportunity to buy one years ago, but I don't think it just wasn't right for me, financially, or even it was yellow. And I was like, I don't know. And here this one comes around and I've fallen in love. So it's been something that when people do appreciate it, you're like, got you. Yeah, that's cool. And I appreciate everyone making this possible for me to continue my growth in my career and hopefully a better facility than this here soon, that I can put out some nice bikes and work with my family and my wife, get involved and maybe do some paint and really get the tailor-made custom cycles thing going. With like in my kind of introduction video, I was like, I don't have any intentions of leaving Dream Rides and really starting my own thing full on. And John's aware of that, and he's supportive in the fact that I'll be doing, maybe frame up bikes like I'm right now, or wiring harnesses and things. I don't want to work on the everyday run of the mill. I want to be selective, but provide my skills and this opportunity to help other people, and they're helping me. Anything that I do directly goes back into supporting my family, and that's what's important to me. And I just really appreciate everybody taking the time to listen and tuning in, and thank you guys, and ride on. Yeah, the tailor-made custom cycles for me has been my efforts to just become known. Like there's that ambition in me where I'm doing this. Even moving all the way to Tennessee to work for John was not just it's to be a player in this stage, and to meet more people like you and bump elbows, rub shoulders, whatever it is, with other people in the industry, and just really get more involved. And that's been so fun for me. Like that's really what I want, and that's what's been happening. And it's growing from here, where I'm very excited for the future. And tailor-made custom cycles will just be my own creative kind of offshoot from that, and I'll still be a productive employee at Dream Rides, and we can all be happy.